Are you a doctor who teaches others, medical students and other doctors? If so, your traditional approach to face-to-face teaching has either already changed or is about to change. Now, a website can be a great way to move your teaching online and keep connected with your students. But you have probably avoided doing this before for a whole bunch of reasons. So I've teamed up with Will Middleton from WP Course Guide to help you out. In this series, we're going to look at options for getting you up and running with your own website in a quick amount of time with a minimum of hassles. In our first video tutorial, we looked at 4 main options for hosting your website and resolved that a WordPress website, whilst not the absolute easiest to set up, is still a very user-friendly option that provides you lots of potential for the future growth and development of your website. Will, could you please now explain for our doctor educators how they can go about setting up a WordPress website?
Hey Anthony, absolutely. So when it comes to a website, there's 2 main things to pay attention to: your domain name and web hosting. We'll talk about both right here. So the first one is a domain name. That's going to be the address of your website. As the example I have here is wpcourseguide.com. That's the domain name I have, and that's what will appear when people search for your website, and that will be the address of your website. There are many companies that allow you to register your domain name through them, such as GoDaddy or Namecheap, just to name a few. And for that, you're looking at about $15 a year for the average domain name, the average .com domain name. The next part is web hosting. So before we dive into a few recommended web hosts, let's dive into the features you're going to want to look for in a web host. So there are 2 main features to look for. The number 1 is backups, and number 2 is SSL. Let's dive into the benefits of both of those. So with backups, it allows you to undo unwanted changes. So if you saved a draft or published a post rather that you didn't want to publish, and maybe it was an accident or whatever, you can always revert to a backup, and you can have those changes that you didn't want to have made saved to the original. And then if you accidentally deleted any data on your website, you can restore that data. If maybe you deleted an author on your website and they had a lot of blog posts, and now all those blog posts are gone, you can easily restore to a backup and everything will be back to where it was. It also allows for safety in case of hacking. If your website goes down for some reason, you'll always have a backup to restore to, and you can always quickly restore your website with good web hosts that offer backups. The second factor is SSL. That is going to be the lock and HTTPS that appear in the upper left-hand corner of your browser. Whenever you visit a website, it's likely going to be https://google.com, for example. And that's the SSL certificate versus the HTTP if there's no SSL certificate. Some of the benefits of SSL is user safety assurance. So it says with an SSL, there's like the little lock and it says secure next to it. That's just something for users to see the site is secure. And some web browsers like Google Chrome will actually say not secure next to your domain name if you don't have an SSL. So it's an important thing to have just for user safety assurance to ensure users that you're using their data in a secure way. And SSL helps to do that. And avoiding web browser notices like we were talking about with Google Chrome, saying not secure, and sometimes there can be a warning if Google knows you're collecting data, maybe even via a contact form, but you don't have an SSL, it'll say warning you're proceeding to a risky site. So always having an SSL allows you to avoid any of those notices from browsers. And accepting credit card payments. You can't accept credit card payments through your website without having an SSL. So if you ever plan to sell online courses or any products through your website, you'll want to have an SSL certificate there. And it's important for SEO. Platforms like Google and search engines will grant priority to websites that have SSL certificates installed, and that'll help you in your SEO rankings if you didn't have an SSL certificate installed there. So yeah, those are the 2 main factors, backups and SSL. So now let's dive into 2 web hosts that we recommend that have both of those features. So Flywheel and SiteGround are 2 that me and Anthony have identified are pretty good hosts for doctors. Let's compare a few of the features. So Flywheel is a little bit more of a premium host. You're going to look at about $15 to $30 a month for getting started with them. And if that's within your budget at the moment, we definitely recommend going for that. But if you're looking at something a little more budget, SiteGround may be a good option to consider. SiteGround does have a $12 a month package, I believe, but for your first year, you can get $6 a month. So if you're first getting started and you're on a budget, SiteGround might be a consideration. But ultimately, that's going to be a very similar price to Flywheel's starter package at $13 a month. So now that you have both the domain name and web hosting, most web hosts will have an easy tutorial on how you can point your domain name over to your web hosting company. So when people visit your domain, wpcoursesguide.com, for example, they will be directed over to your hosting company, such as Flywheel or SiteGround. And if you have any questions about that process, you can always get in touch with Flywheel support or SiteGround support. Both of the two companies have live support, and they'd be happy to help you out with that process. So once you have everything situated with your domain name and web host, you're ready to install WordPress. Both Flywheel and SiteGround have a different way of installing WordPress. Flywheel, it's just an automatic process, and SiteGround is actually an installer, but they have an easy step-by-step guide on how you can install WordPress. And once WordPress is installed and you visit your domain name, you'll have a website with a default coming soon page, or you might just have an out-of-the-box theme. And in the next video, we'll dive into how you can log into the backend of your WordPress website and customize it to look how you want it to.
Thanks, Will. So, in this video, we covered off on the issue of hosting your website. There are lots of options for hosting, but we've selected two of the main WordPress dedicated hosting options for you. From my personal experience, it's definitely worth paying a little bit more for what is often called managed WordPress hosting for a bunch of reasons, which include things like the fact that your site generally runs better, as well as when you have an issue, the support staff will know WordPress and be able to help you out. Now, we'll mention a term a few times in that video, and that term was SSL. So what is SSL? Well, as Will indicated, SSL is a security measure for your website that gives assurance to users of your site and enables you to do things like e-commerce, should you wish to. SSL stands for Secure Socket Layer. It's basically a security standard technology for establishing an encrypted, secure link between a web server and a browser. This link ensures that the data placed between the web server and the browser remains private. So, one of the problems is that if you hit an unsecure website, a hacker might be able to place a piece of software on the web server that can tell when a person is entering data into that unsecure website and then use that data for nefarious reasons. But when you visit a website that's encrypted with SSL, your browser will form a connection with the web server, look at the certificate, and then bind together your browser and the server. This binding connection is so secure that no one besides you and the website see the information being submitted. And this connection happens instantly, and in fact, many suggest it's now faster than connecting to an unsecure website. You simply have to visit a website with SSL and your connection is automatically secured. So it's definitely worth having SSL on your website. Now, the good thing is that with most managed WordPress hosting sites these days, they provide you with that SSL certificate for free. So, thus far we've picked WordPress as our platform and installed it using a web host. However, you would have noticed that what we have installed so far needs a little bit of work. So in our next episode lesson, we will look at how you can start personalizing your website by installing a theme.